All right, we are live. Welcome to the Rabyd Atheist and the Rabyd Atheist live Bible study. The very first live Bible study, by the way, as well. So, um, I earlier today I released my Bible study video, "Questionable Witnesses," where I talked about Jesus's boyhood. I think what I want to do with the live Bible studies is basically kind of follow up on that video and talk about the text more directly and kind of look line by line at whatever text I'm dealing with on that week as kind of a way of doing a live question and answer. So this idea has been floating in my head probably for a year to do something like this. And so you're looking at the beginnings of it. If this becomes too much Bible study for some people, I guess I can put something else here. I'll come up with something else, but it seems a logical thing for me to do. So let's see who we got. We got Rimmers here, I believe, and Martin is here. So yeah, hi guys. And a few, Bible studies aren't always the greatest. Just by the way, every other Wednesday I have therapy, and it's like 5 to 5:50. So that's why I put a little note in there about sometimes this might be 6-ish because I might be getting off therapy, and I usually have about 10 minutes in between that and 6 o'clock. So there's that. Hey, Deviant. Um, so get your money's. I can't get. Yeah, I got to get my money's worth out of my Bible studies and biblical studies and my theological studies degree. So no, I don't know. I think the track gets derailed all on its own. It's kind of a when you consider who's here, it's kind of that thing. That's kind of what happens. So, but yeah, hi David. Uh, but yeah, it's so what I'm planning on doing on Wednesdays though is a Bible study based on whatever biblical study video I dropped early in the week, and I'm probably going to drop that on Mondays instead of Wednesdays. Get it out early, so you guys can talk about it for a couple days, and then we'll do a live chat about it where I kind of go through it verse by verse, and it's a little bit different. That's what I'm going to do today is kind of look at this text in Luke 2. We're going to talk about Jesus as a boy and some of the other bullshit that goes along with that throughout Christian history. I remember when I read, it's been many years ago when I read through all the other gospels, and the infancy gospels and the childhood of Jesus gospels were always the most outstandingly outrageous. So, um, uh, uh, you're here to help with chat. Okay, very good. Hey, Michael. Yeah, I just ended up being a carpenter off. I'll never learn to write either. A whole bunch of things could be cleared up about Jesus if Jesus just wrote. If he just wrote some stuff, down, and it would leave a lot less to the imagination. So. Hey, Katie. Why would anybody do that? Indeed, why? Why would anybody do that? All right. Well, the format is going to be pretty simple for this one. I'm going to pull up the text. I have it printed out and in PowerPoint form, and I'm just going to talk about it, read it out loud, and talk about it, and see how far we get within an hour. So let's get the text of Luke 2, 41 through 52. I made the remark in the video that Luke and Matthew have very different tones about Jesus's early life. Like Matthew has Jesus running from the law, but Luke is just like pretty domestic, very family oriented about Jesus's family. And so you got this passage at the end of Luke chapter 2 where it's one in the Gospels, the 4 Gospels in the Bible. It's really the only place that talks about Jesus's childhood. there's a lot of other stuff. Um, there's a lot of other things that other gospels have outside the four canonical ones about Jesus's childhood, including some pretty ridiculous ones. I think there's a story about Jesus making some clay pigeons and bringing them to life, as I recall. That'd been really good in Duck Hunt, I guess. And then you have, like, there's one story where a boy gets killed some way and Jesus raises him to life as a young boy. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, there never was a census number one. Yeah. Yeah. So the issue with this passage that I've always had is it's the only time any gospel writer talks about Jesus's boyhood. And I think there's a theological reason for doing so, because the thing about, like, we're going to, next time I touch the gospels, it'll be the Gospel of Mark. We have to talk about it, but the Gospel of Mark just jumps right in with John the Baptist. There is no birth narrative or childhood. And I think a lot of the other gospels that are later, they're just trying to fill in the gaps. I think me and Rimmer had a chat discussion earlier this afternoon about how the gospels always seem to try to fill in the missing parts of the previous gospels. And I really think that Luke and Matthew wrote about the same time, but they were in different geographical regions with different stories. And that's why their narratives, their oral traditions around them were different. And so they ended up with different accounts. So, yeah. I wish. No, it's not mine. There's an artist out there. I can't remember their name, but it's a print of one of their works, and I love it. I love the whole wolves and ravens motif. If I ever get a tattoo, that's probably going to be the style and stuff, the way I do things. But so Passover, bloody offering right there. Yeah, they went up to the festival of Passover. So if it's their custom, you see, this is one of the other things that, in I debate about Jesus and his family and his upbringing from a story point of view. I like to remind everybody, I'm going to tell you straight up, whether this is history or not is very, very, very questionable. Thus the title of my series, Questionable Witnesses. But if I'm looking at it as literature, as four different fans' accounts of their fanboy Jesus, you get the picture of Jesus's parents here is that they are very much religious. They're heading to the Passover feast, right? And so he's 12 years old. They go up to the festival according to their custom. This is what they do every year. This brings up questions about how well off Jesus and his family were, because if his father was a house builder and they have the money to make this journey, the resources to make this journey every year, that ain't poor folk. Okay. That's a little bit, especially from Nazareth, it's a little bit different, today than back then, but it's like, this is something that they did every year, and they take the whole family, and from the rest of the story, it's like the whole family group, like everybody that's related to each other makes this pilgrimage every year together. So that. Hey, Lisa. So what the story tells us is, okay, Jesus's parents were good Jewish parents. They took their kids to Passover. They went up to the temple to do the Passover thing every single year. And so they go up to the festival, and the festival gets over, right? And they start to head home. And what they don't realize is that Jesus decides to stay behind, and they were unaware of it. Now, a lot of people get after Jesus's parents for not really being very good parents at this point of keeping track of their kid, but Jesus is 12, and to the Jewish customs of the time, Jesus is an adult, okay, by legal definition at 12. So he's been bar mitzvahed, so to speak, and so he is a 12-year-old fully functioning adult male in his society. And so it's not unusual that they wouldn't keep track of him. But I also point out that if the accounts in these gospels are correct, and if we put all the stuff together about Jesus and his family, uh, one discussion that often comes up is, Joseph and Mary and their relationship to each other, because the Catholics like to keep Mary a virgin in perpetuity. And it's like, you have to get past that verse. I think it's in Matthew where it says, he kept her a virgin until after she gave birth, which the insinuation is that Mary and Joseph got busy afterwards. And the fact that later on the temple priests, and the leaders will say, aren't his four brothers with us, and give names of his four brothers, and aren't his sisters with us as well, indicating that he had two sisters. Yeah, Mary and Joseph had kids. And that does a lot of damage to certain Catholic doctrines, but yeah. So yeah, it's lost for 3 days. He did. Well, maybe he's probably banging some Roman chick. Katie, honestly, this is the flaws of the story, even at the time, because family units were very important back then. I mean, you knew who your second cousin twice removed was, because you never knew who your relationships were kind of the way people survived. And so, yeah. So they they go back and look for Jesus, and like, they don't find him among their relatives and friends that had gone up to Passover with him. Like, where's our kid? And where's Jesus? He was right here. It's like Home Alone, only no Home Alone. They counted all the heads and all that stuff, and suddenly Jesus isn't there. Hey, Earl, it's good to see you. Yeah, I mean, like, today you can check on your kid in about 3 seconds. I remember when I finally gave my kids phones, it was a great way to keep tabs on them. How you doing? What you doing right now? But back then, you don't have that. You have to, like, literally keep physical eyes on things. So, there's that. I don't know. I think it's more of a Jewish tradition. The problem is the Bible does make a differentiation between people who are younger and their responsibility to the law, and those that are adults. And so I think when you look at the Old Testament law, there's a lot of traditions that of necessity have to come up. Like, it tells you not to journey more than a Sabbath day's journey, for instance, but never tells you what a Sabbath day journey is. So it doesn't tell you that. And so you don't know. So yeah, it's for this bar mitzvah tradition, it's like, I think they just came up with something that said, okay, now you're passing into adult. Well, people didn't live very long back then. So 12 seems kind of young to us, but you grew up fast in the ancient world. It wasn't a nice place all the time. So, a lot of survival mentality, I think. Yeah. I had a friend who was a pastor in Appalachia, and he used to make the joke, when they say it's all relative here in West Virginia, they're not kidding. So, yeah, it happens. House of Windsor, yeah. They've always had to inject some new blood in lately. I think that's Harris. Oh my goodness. Oh, Joseph drive-through nativity play, really? Wow. I've seen those, but I've never been to one. Yeah. So we have Jesus missing, and so his parents go on a case. They thought that he was in the company, he was with all the relatives, and then they notice, oh, he's not here. And they go back to Jerusalem to look for him, and they find him after 3 days. They find him in the temple courts. Now, Jerusalem, it could be hard to find somebody in Jerusalem at the time. It's a fairly sizable city. So I get the search for 3 days. And they find him in the temple courts, and he's sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking questions. So it's an interesting setup to a story, because they add the 3 days in there. I don't think that's an unintentional action. The gospel writers seem to have a fascination with the idea of 3 days, probably because of the prediction of their character Jesus in the gospels, that he'll rise in 3 days. So, no, I don't think he was of any use. And that's funny that you say that about Luke, because Luke is like the guy who mentions the Holy Spirit the most in his writings, in some senses, other than John, I think. So, kind of Slumdog Millionaire, yeah, it could be. But they find him in the temple courts, and he's with the teachers, and he's listening to them, asking questions. And this is where I came up with a question: how smart was Jesus really? But your parents are going to be anxious about your absence, but you disappear on them anyway without saying so. Um, I don't know. It seemed this is the part of the story that never really seemed to make sense given who Jesus was to me, and still doesn't make sense. If he's this kind of omniscient dude, he could have told his parents what he was going to do. I seems like it would have been the polite thing to do, but he doesn't. He's just kind of, I'm just going to disappear on your asses, and you're going to have to find me later and be anxious about it. So, yeah, it's point I'm making there is they do 3s and 7s and 12s. And I think the 3 days thing is not an accidental thing. It's foreshadowing, or whatever you want to call it, in the way they're writing back then. So you have that aspect of it. So now we have this scene where Mary and Joseph finally find their kid in the temple, and there he is teaching. He's listening to the teachers, he's asking questions, so on and so forth. So yeah, Jesus was Holy Ghosted. Yes. I mean, it's like it. I mean, if you're gonna, if one of my kids had taken off at this age without telling me where they were going, there was going to be words, because that action in and of itself is just like not to be done. So, yes, incest is a relative affair. Yes, uh, the jokes that happen in chat, you guys, you never cease to amaze me. So. Well, that's something I want to talk about, Cranky Elder God. I mentioned it in my video earlier today, but the moving of the theological goalposts about Jesus, about, oh, he's emptied himself of his divinity, but somehow here he shows he's divine. And it's the back and forth that you're going to see that people have to do to get past all that. They have to run around this idea of Jesus being human and being divine, and they have to play this game. So it's like the scene here is a pretty typical one. What Jesus does with it in the next slide here, I'll get to that in a minute, is really what I find fascinating. Because, in verse 47, it says, everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. And so, in other words, they're asking him all these questions, and he's answering them very, very well from their standpoint. And you'll hear theologians go, yeah, because he was displaying his divinity of what he was before he became man. Like he's now this divine person, and now he's revealing his divinity. And yet, as a human being, he doesn't seem to do very well here in this passage, and the fact that he can't simply tell his parents where he's going to be. So, hey, Bren. And Alex is here too. Good. So yeah, it's an interesting part of the story, because for me, this was always problematic. Like, what is Jesus displaying here? Is he, as a character, starting to display his understanding of who his father really is? I mean, I'd have to ask, when we get to the end, what do you think Joseph felt about all this? That, yeah, that's right. This isn't my kid. Okay. This is God banging my wife before she was my wife, and here we have this kid, and now what am I going to do? Yeah, how many thousand years was the 3 days? So yeah. I'm not sure. You can never tell, Brent. This place is chaos. I try to run this place as anarchy until it needs to be absolute dictatorship. So, yeah, and that's, but if you read Matthew, did he have an ordinary early life? See, this is one of my great contradictions of the scripture. And I have a guy that always answers these videos that I do about the life of Christ. And he always says the same things. And I always point out the same problems, but it's like, the account in Matthew has Jesus running from the law. Like the family is always under pressure until they finally settle in Nazareth. Whereas Luke doesn't have any of that shit. Like it's a pretty normal family drama kind of thing at times. It's like, Matthew has this high political, espionage running from people trying to kill you kind of vibe. And then you get to Luke and it's more of a family drama kind of vibe. So it's like you definitely see the two writers having very different viewpoints on the early life of Jesus. And I think it's the two tones that contradict for me. It seems like if all the other stuff in Matthew was going on, you'd have Luke writing more about some of that intrigue. The fact that they don't cross over at all is kind of telling. So, it's all the 3-day events throughout the Holy Ghost leads to void of death. Yeah, there's a lot of ways you could put this if you put it into a movie form, isn't it? I mean, smart ass, almost teenage kid disses his parents. I mean, this would be a good one for that. Oh man, Earl. Yep, I am your benevolent dictator for life, and I'm an easy dictator to follow because I very rarely use my power. so, so, that is a rabid chat. Michael makes a very valid point. This is rabid chat. So, but dealing with the early part of this part of the passage, I always had trouble with the way he treats his parents in this point of view. Like, what do you mean you're anxiously searching for me? It's like, dude, you've been missing for 3 days. You haven't seen us for 4 or 5. We thought you were with the relatives and just had come back with them and you're gone. You don't think that, because, Mary has a valid point. Son, why have you treated us like this? Father and I have been anxiously searching for you. It's interesting that in this passage, Mary basically makes reference to Joseph being his father. And I always thought that was an interesting slip up for the writer to make. Like, it's clearly assumed that Joseph, by the people around him in the story, that Joseph is his dad. Okay. And when Mary makes this statement, she's also part of that assumption. Like, she feeds into that assumption that Joseph is his father. And it's like, it's an interesting moment for the family, isn't it? Because apparently now Jesus is very, very aware that Joseph is not his dad. Okay. So there's that. Yes. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thought, isn't it? It's like we have this preservation of a moment of poor Joseph basically being told, "Hey, you're not my daddy." It's like that's not Jesus's daddy. You're not it. And so, eh, yeah, he probably had it better than many of us did. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting story, but it's like the death and resurrection thing. I've always pointed out that it's just a bad weekend for God. It would be more impressive if a God gives up his eternal life so other people can have it, so humanity could have it. Like, I'm going to die forever so you guys can live forever. Would have been a better story. Um, Seventh. You know, I used to hate that show. As a pastor, I hated that show. I liked a lot of it. Don't get me wrong, my kids and everybody liked to watch it, and I'd watch it and I'd be like, dude, you meddle too much. I hated the pastor main character because he's just meddling too much. Like, dude, the reason there's a lot of problems is you're always meddling. It's like, quit meddling. No. Apologies. Yeah. Yeah, he does. He treats his parents like idiots to the New Testament. They really named Jesus real dad is God. He hated the last name Ben Joseph, son of Joseph. Um, you know, it leads to a lot of jokes about, it's like Joseph has to accept the fact that his wife got pregnant by somebody else throughout the entire story. And, it's in a society like that society, like he has to take and the other thing this brings up is that God is maintaining a deception to protect his kid. Like everybody assumes Joseph is the dad, and it's something that everybody propagates, including Mary here. And so it's deceptive. It's like you're being deceptive about who the origin of Jesus is. And well, you didn't really need to worry. I mean, if you're God in the flesh, you can just make it all right in the end. You're not my dad. You're not my dad. Yeah, exactly. It does read that way, doesn't it? Because like when he says, "Well, you're searching for, did you know I had to be in my father's house?" They didn't understand what he was saying to them. It's like other translations, didn't you know I have to be about my father's business? It's like your father and I have just been searching for you all day, but I've been about my father's business, my real dad. So I found my real dad, and now I'm following what he wants me to do. So, is it name envy, Barabba? Yeah, it could be it. Yeah, they do forget about details like that. I think this is what you and I were talking about earlier. That the later gospel is, you'll notice that they're trying to cover gaps in the plot. They're trying to answer questions. Like I think, um, like Mark doesn't really have a lot in it about birth or the resurrection at all. And so you see Luke and Matthew and later John just trying to fill the gaps that Mark has. Um, like when Luke talks about how the temple priests bribed the guards, it's like obviously that's a response to somebody saying, well, yeah, they just stole the body or whatever, which is a perfectly legit explanation. And so all of that began to happen. So maybe the Bible just admits that Joseph was all in for the Yahweh fertility clinic. Oh my gosh, how much if it was Yahweh's sperm, how much could you sell that for? Just saying. Yeah, instead of Joseph. Yeah, you got Joseph. So you're not my dad. So, I mean, let's be fair to Joseph. Poor Joseph. How do you live up to that? I mean, how do you're always going to be the second best in anything. Okay. Because of who the father of your first kid is. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's right out of Springer, ain't it? It is. Yeah, Jesus loves us all so much. If you follow, you're gonna go to hell. Hey John, hope everything's treating you well in Holland too. Nobody took offense. Well, let me talk about that, Deviant. I'm a Stoic. So my answer to when somebody says I'm offended is very Christopher Hitchens, like, well, I'm still waiting for your argument. Um, and I also think if you're easily offended, it kind of tells me something about how easy it is to emotionally manipulate you. Um, I can offend you, I can manipulate you. So something I learned from them as well. So yeah, I'm just saying. I'm just saying, Katie. I mean, if Yahweh donated his sperm to a sperm bank, how much would women be willing to pay for that? You know, I'm trying to get a dollar amount here. um, I just this story has so many holes and questions for me now. Um, Jesus as a boy is kind of an interesting topic anyway, because you get the infancy gospels and the child gospels thrown on top of this, and they're all written later, and it illustrates the point that later gospels are always trying to fill in the gaps. It's like apologetics starts out early. You have the story has gaps, it has questions, it has theological questions. So you have to fill in the blanks with later gospels. And I think a lot of people, as time went by, well, what was Jesus like as a boy? And they only had this, one canonical story. And so a bunch of other gospel writers come along and they start to fill in the gaps. So there's that. I think that would be a very boring movie. The problem with heaven, I I don't know, maybe it's because I've been listening to Hitchens on this and reading about it a little bit with him, but it's like the more I think about the Christian doctrine of heaven, the less I like it. Okay, it feels more like hell to me. To just spend the rest of your life worshiping God, that I don't know how that appeals to anybody. I'd rather go to hell for the company. So, so nobody got offended. Uh, David, there's a perfect opportunity for a cult there. I'm just saying it. This is, it's better than Apostle Paul sweat, where the story in Acts where he wipes the sweat of his brow or Peter or whoever it is and hands it to people and then that touches them and it heals them. Can you imagine if you could convince people that you had Yahweh's sperm? Okay. Yes, you have a right not to give a shit. Yes. But can you imagine if you could convince people that this was God's actual seed? Like it's his stuff. What kind of money you'd make? Okay, and this story brings up all kinds of questions because it's like Joseph gets Josephed here, and it's like he's basically you throw Joseph's character into this reminder that, oh yeah, this kid isn't mine. And I wonder what that what Mary saw in Yahweh. So yeah, it's kind of a weird idea, I get it. But I'm just saying there's a cult idea there. You could start a cult and make a shit ton of money with that one. So I thought that was only one of his well, that's what I'm saying. You also don't have to maintain a supply because you can just sell vials of empty whatever and just call it, well, that's what's in there. It's been done before, is all my point, Abe. It's been done before. So the rapture pet insurance business was your first thought, but Yahweh sperm seems like a much more lubricant. See, this is why I love chat. You guys never fail me. You always amuse me, and you make my day. Yeah, I, I'm just saying. There's also John. There's also variants that you could do with this sperm for different things like that, like second coming sperm. You know, um, the highest and best. I mean, there's a list of product you could make with this thing already. So yes, you are, and I'm disappointed. It makes me sad. So, but we were just, I'm postulating the idea because, Mary got impregnated by Yahweh for her first child. And then later on, Joseph had to settle for, seconds and thirds and all that. So the question becomes, could you make a cult out of selling Yahweh sperm? Could you do that? And I think you could. I think you could do that. Yeah, you could have wine from the wedding in Cana as a supplement. Sperm relics, yes. Brent and I he gave me this video on relics, and I've been watching it again. And I have more every time I watch the video, Brent, by the way, I get more questions and more confused. Um, but the whole relics thing, why did is there any Catholic relic that involves Jesus's genitalia or a saint's genitalia? I'm just curious. So every sperm is holy, every sperm is sacred. Yes, that's what Monty Python taught me. So yeah, I remember in seminary we had this discussion. Did Jesus go to the bathroom, and how did he go to the bathroom? So what kind of tree would spring up? Oh boy. Oh man. Yeah, Hollywood or Hollywood, yeah. Oh, I know, I know. I don't blame the chat for everything. I just look at who's in it, Elder God, and know what's going to happen. There's certain inevitabilities to the universe, and I know where my chat's going as soon as I see who's here. I absolutely know. It's kind of the way it goes. I can't really blame them. It's just the way they are. Yeah, I mean, that's what, the Holy Spirit will come upon you. The power of the Most High will overshadow you. I mean, that's a very polite way of I'm going to impregnate you myself. You know, and I don't get that, that people don't want to talk about that, but but in this story, poor Joseph, I feel for the dude. I mean, how do you follow up on Yahweh? I mean, how do you be, how do you live up to that? You know? Yep. Oh, yeah, a lot of those. Zeus is notorious for that. I mean, he's all the heroes of Greek mythology are directly the result of his affairs. So, oh my gosh. Yes, a fig tree naturally. Yeah, I suppose that's true. there are a few holy foreskins. Really? Oh, what did they do with those? I mean, what was the point of those? See, the whole relic thing just boggles my mind. Um, because it's like they all supposed to have superpowers. And I'm wondering what a holy foreskin, what the superpower would be. I mean, or were they selling what we're already trying to sell again here in chat? You know, were they already selling the fertility thing? So, I mean, because I look at this passage and it's like, okay, there's a lot of sexual references here without intending to be so, because God's my father kind of thing. So there's that. Oh my. You have to wonder. You have to wonder. Would he have STDs? I think that's probably the advantage of God. You can just erase those. So, yeah, yeah, Yahweh's kind of a pretty absent father. I mean, he impregnates a girl and walks away, and a that's a tale as old as time in mythology, as a god impregnating a female and taking off. Yeah, the swan thing. Somehow, this was attractive to some female, though, in the story. Well, yeah, it's a question, isn't it? Because the bottom part says he went to Nazareth with him, and he was obedient to them after that. Like he never did something like that again. So did Jesus refuse to do the dishes? Did he refuse to take out the trash? Did he, refuse to sweep up his room? I don't know. His father was a house builder, so I often wonder how big the house was. Oh, I was just talking about that with my therapist today because my main issue these days is thinking about going back into the dating dystopian world of that. And it's like, I tell this story of when I was in Houston, I was dating at the time, and this lady DMs me and she goes, "Hey, we should get together." And so I look at her profile, and the first thing in her profile is, "I'm a woman of God looking for a man of God." And I about laughed out of my chair. I texted her back and just said, "Have you looked at my profile? You should probably look at my profile." So, well, there was that. And that ended that one. So, but yeah, I don't know how you go after a Jesus chick after that, I guess. They're hard. Yeah, I know. I mean, I get the relics thing, relics and magic are there, but the Catholics have it in spades. Like they still do it. Like there's still relics and stuff in part of their worship system. And I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know. I'll tell you there. Yeah, like, well, see, to be fair to Jesus, it never says that he's actually a carpenter. It says he's the carpenter's son. It doesn't really go into Jesus's occupation. So I would say um, apprentice carpenter, maybe to dad because he was the oldest, and then later on cult leader and making, and then finally officially cult leader. So that might be it. Turn them into leather chastity belt for holy foreskin. And he made STDs. That's a good topic. Shining raisins. Oh, yeah, that's probably true. Probably true. Yes. Yeah, there's that. Because like one of the pharaohs was going after Sarah, who is Abraham's wife, because he didn't bother to tell anybody that it was his wife, because he was afraid of getting killed. You know, just tell him you're my sister, and then they end up developing a disease which sounds very much like an STD, which means what exactly happened between Pharaoh and Sarah. And I want to know what her beauty treatment was because I want to sell that shit. Because if you're in your 80s and you still look hot, I got to figure out what the hell that is. So it's one of the more interesting stories of the Bible. Yeah, he was a good boy. Um, if you're not going to sin, you have to honor your parents all the time. The problem is this story doesn't have him honoring his parents very well. And then later on, he's kind of snippy with his mother. So I don't know. Father Flanagan's altar boys. Yeah, you got to watch out for the altar boys. Keep a close eye on them, particularly when the priests get close. Scaffolder. Yeah. See, the debate about what that word carpenter means is it's like, is he a general practitioner of house building and building stuff, or is he just a guy that works with wood, which lends itself to a whole bunch of other jokes? So, yes, yes, Mary was the pole dancer because her father, her husband was her second husband, maybe if you want to look at it that way. Yeah, a table made by Jesus would be valuable. I could sell that shit. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't seem like he was a slave. I think they were actually fairly well to do. It's a classic case of rich people passing themselves off as poor so that they get a story written about them. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really go into what Jesus actually did for a living himself. Atheist? Okay, here you go, chat. Pickup lines atheists could use on godly women. I think BS is onto something here. So there you go. There you go, chat. Yeah, it was a plan. Yeah, there's definitely they. I don't know. It in Matthew, it feels like it's the plan. Like, okay, we can't be in populated areas because these Herods are going to get us. Whereas Luke doesn't seem to give a shit about that at all. So let's see. Unless you're the son of God and dad is mad at his lesser creatures, human beings, even though Jesus is a halfway beast. Yeah, that brings in a whole other discussion too, doesn't it? Let's see. Oh man. Yeah, I mean, I look at the story, and that's part of the story that doesn't make sense to me. But you know, we talk about illiteracy, but he wasn't illiterate according to the story, in my opinion, because he gets up and he reads a scroll in one of the synagogues, so he knows how to read and write, and yet he doesn't do any in himself. He doesn't do any writing about himself. So I need to make somebody say, "Oh God." That's how I would rephrase that. Hey, honey, I need a believer to make him say, "Oh God," tonight. There you go. Great one, Katie. Sweetie, can you show me how that laying on hands really works? That's amazing. Oh, can I show you my circumcision scar? There you go. Oh, let's see. Yeah, Luke knew that Hera was already dead. It's like, yeah, and I think that's what it was. I think like Matthew is trying to make a political point, and Luke doesn't have that political point to make, so he doesn't pick those stories. But it would be nice if any of these stories had overlapped even just a little bit in the birth narratives, you'd have a better case that there was at least a common story about Jesus, but and his origin. But you don't have that. That's the real problem with these the two accounts. I mean, it just when I was going through this whole the questionable witness series with the two accounts, it's like this really it's like they didn't know anything about anything, what each other was writing, and it's a dead end for me. Jova Shade. Hey girl, you must be Jesus and I must be Roman because God I want oh oh my gosh, see, you guys never fail me. Yeah, I think that's the issue that I have now with the Gospels, besides the fact that they're anonymous, Alex, and all like, where did this story come from? How did Luke get a hold of this story? He doesn't tell us. Okay, so he could be making it up. Like the guy that chatted today in the video, he's like, well, he's trying to do everything carefully from the beginning. No, the writer says he's trying to do everything carefully from the beginning. That doesn't mean he is. Okay, it's like there's that. Yeah, they don't give you this. Oh, let's see. I can feel you coming. All right, Rimmer. There you go. Uh, I don't know. That's a it's a valid option, Katie. Is Kenny in South Park? Jesus, they killed Kenny. May not have stigmata, but I got another hole you can nail. All right, Earl. Outstanding. If your hand leads you to sin, Martin, there's somebody that knows the Bible. The devil made me do you. Oh my gosh. I don't know. There's another good question, Ronald. Because if the claim is that Jesus is also God, how does he grow in favor with himself? At this point, the passage creates a theological problem. I've been waiting all night for somebody to point it out. But it's like, how do you grow in favor with yourself? How does that work? Um, Now, it's at this point that the people that say that Jesus was some sort of human that was a divine Superman type makes a hell of a lot more sense than that he was God. Okay. So so there's that. I mean, it's growing in favor with yourself. How do you do that? Um, and this basically, the writer Luke is kind of tipping his hand a little bit on what he thinks about who Jesus was. This story, I think, is included because the writer of Luke is trying to get some sort of theological point about who Jesus was across with the story. And he's like, he's there, he's there with this statement. It's like, how can he grow in favor with himself? How can he, if he's God, then that statement doesn't make any sense. So, oh, oh my gosh. Yes, take a bow, Earl. There you go. She curtsies because she's a Southern Belle still. So Jesus was the Logos. Yeah, I suppose that's so. But that's the thing. Like John, with that, he really makes Jesus into God. Like you can make a real damn good case that Jesus is God from John. But when you look at Luke and Matthew, it's harder to make. And it's lines like that one that make it harder to make. So yeah, it's like I know why people do the tourist thing. I mean, I was watching Pelagia's video a couple days ago, and the whole idea that Christian tourism in the Holy Land has been a thing like from very early on, and it still is. It's been a weird. Show you my spaghetti monster. All right. Like I'm smart for my age, so my ego is expanding. Okay, there you go. Uh, let's see. James Tabor show a messianic movement was around at that time. Jesus was a failed Messiah, but his followers could not accept it and came up with an addition. I think I I think so, but I think because of the superstition of the time, it's as a former Pentecostal, I can tell you this: it doesn't take long for a supernatural story to be fact and to be repeated over and over again. So it's why I think Pelagia's minimal witness theory is one of the better ones that's come out in a long time, and that's why apologists have fits with it because they know it's damn good. because all you need is Peter to see a vision of what he thinks is resurrected Jesus, tell everybody else. And my Pentecostal knowledge of how people work, you get that all of a sudden other people are seeing Jesus, even if they don't. Like literally, you can have this groupthink moment that just kind of permeates it, and you only need one person to start it. I saw it all the time. So I've never been to the Holy Land. I know what you're talking about, but I've never been there. I'm not sure I'd want to go. It's from my perspective, it's a yellow risk travel zone and red sometimes. So I think that's what it is. You got a franchise. That's why I'm saying I think we have a great idea here for a great cult. Um, like if a Christian woman is having fertility problems, just sell her a vial of Yahweh sperm. I'm serious, and there will be somebody that'll buy it. Ugh. Yeah, in the end, the luckiest thing that ever happened to Christianity is a Roman emperor bought into it. Um, People say, well, you didn't have to be a Christian in his empire. Yeah, but it sure damn helped if you wanted his favor. And the whole his mother finding these sites and relics and stuff, and most of it based on either oral tradition or conjecture or convenient visions. I love the way Apologia put that because that's damn true. So, but yeah, it's like Christian tourism after the empire embraced Christianity into the Holy Land was a lucrative business. Like you can tell that they made a shit ton of money off of it. So there was probably enough pieces of the Holy Cross to make, hundreds of crosses. So, yep, it's a great pyramid scheme. It works. Uh, oh, the Grange. Oh my goodness. No, I haven't. I saw it. I was almost tempted to go, and I decided against it. I couldn't decide whether it's my religious trauma syndrome probably kicking in. I tend to avoid religious things in life, so it's hard to do that all the time because like my family, a lot of my family is still religious, so I have to deal with that. But I think now religious attractions just aren't attractive to me. I mean, other than the Ark encounter, because I know if I went to the Ark encounter, I'd just sit back and laugh the entire time. So. Yeah, it's smaller than the Great Lakes. So um, I think there's a point in the Sea of Galilee you can stand and you can see across the whole thing. There's like a tall hill that you can see the whole thing. It's not that big. The Virgin Mary's mom, 7 churches have that verified. Jesus, how many mothers did you have? Yeah, Roman Empire 2.0. Yeah, it's like walking on water was a real thing. Yeah, that would be cool. And I walk on water too when it's winter all the time. I walked on water today because I walked across the whole thing of ice. So, uh, da, 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 I think the only thing else I did want to say about this passage before we kind of wrap it up um, is how this short story kind of sets a little bit of a tone for the rest of the book because we haven't got to the rest of the book of Luke, but there seems to be this okay, we have a great expectation for what Jesus is going to be from a literature standpoint after this story. Like if you were reading Luke for the first time, I mean, you get a lot of things there. Um, his origin story and some of the things his mother struggles with, and the fact that his earthly dad isn't his dad. So yeah, and then all of a sudden there's this expectation. Okay, he's growing in favor with God and man. What is he going to be? And it's great literature setup, but that's about it. Yeah, he's the one character in the entire gospel accounts that I feel sorry for, because he's just like he does all the work of a father for Jesus, except it's not really his. And I find that very interesting that God takes that approach with it. So, but yeah, now the expectations for Jesus though are pretty high. So, from a literary point of view, it's definitely setting Jesus up for a better story. So, yeah, he's kind of a simp. I'll agree with that. He is kind of a simp. I mean, it according to the story of Matthew, it takes God showing up with an angel himself, kind of to convince him to do this. But that's a pretty heavy convincing, right? But it's still, so, and it'd still be one of those things that'll be forever remembered about Joseph, because he does all this shit for Jesus, but he's never really the dad. And then you get to this story where Jesus basically tells him, "Yeah, I know you're not my dad." So it's like that. Really, you're gonna go there, Earl? Let's role play. I'll be a lot. You'll be a lot. No, that's a line that you would use to a Christian dude. That might be interesting. He'd probably take you up on it, though. He's the patron saint for stepfathers. I could see that. I could definitely see that. Probably fitting. See, it works in Alabama, Earl. It works. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I don't know. I think we covered this passage. I mean, if there's any other thoughts or questions, I don't know. I'll entertain them for a few minutes. But it's like, I think as I do this Bible study live on Wednesdays, as we go through the different Bible studies I do, like next week will be the Book of Acts. I'll be covering, I think it's Simon the Sorcerer. Um, that'll be an interesting discussion on magic in the New Testament. It'll work just fine. There you go. See, now you have a pickup line for the Christian guy that knows his Bible. So the trunk bitch. Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of that in some places. Oh my god. This is why I'm so petrified of going back into the dating world. It's so dystopian. It's like, uh, oh yeah, I heard about that. I heard about the Last Kingdom. I wouldn't recommend it. They have expectations, but not. I'm going to tell you this from my experience in the church and watching all this stuff. This is a great, interesting question. I am now firmly convinced that there's a hell of a lot more relationships and sex going on in the church than outside of it. It's they've gotten really good covering it up. So I think, Earl, if you showed up and had a pulse and had any kind of pickup line with a Christian dude, he would very much fall prey to your temptations. It's like he would look at it that way. It's like why not? Um, and I don't think Christian women are much better either. They like to put off like they're better than everybody else, but I'm fairly certain a lot of them are getting nailed too. So, so I'll be the shepherd and you be the sheep. That probably works in Alabama too. That could be. Yeah, I mean, see, it works. I mean, I know it works. Okay. I've seen it work. Okay. But you have to, it's like you said, she's a cultural Christian, right? Yeah. And that's different than somebody who's a fundamentalist Christian, who their belief is central to who they are. You know, Mary treasures the thought of Joseph getting dumped on. I have to wonder about that. We have so little to go on between the relationship between Joseph and Mary. Like Matthew's pretty silent about it. And in this case, you got Mary basically insinuating that Joseph is Jesus's father, but Jesus isn't buying it. So, no. Yeah, I mean that's kind of my point. You know, it's like it's I think this is one of the things I'm dealing with because with thoughts of dating again is like I don't think I can deal with people that are too superstitious or too religious. It would drive me insane. So it would just I wouldn't put up with it. And that would be my problem with it. So it's kind of the thoughts on it. But now this story brings up a lot of issues like that. Like, you know, if you knew, okay, if you put yourself in Joseph's spot, if you knew that this child wasn't yours, why would you take care of it when God's the father? It's like I'm covering for a deadbeat dad that's rich and powerful and everything else, and I'm the poorer dude, and I am actually raising your kid. Yeah, I think in modern days times we would have some pretty good criticism of this story from a social point of view. Yes, the Catholic Church has maintained that even to this day, that she was a virgin forever. Um, that's what I was talking about earlier, because that's why there's theories that Joseph was an older man that already had kids. That's why they came up with the idea that, you know, she has a virginity forever, you know, that magically, exactly as you said, her hymen is always intact, even though Joseph bangs her afterwards, you know. It's like, so there's that. I mean, there's a lot of these things that are told after the fact to cover this stuff up. So, and this story leads to some of those questions. So, but yeah, there's a lot of people that still believe that. Okay. If you have a Catholic who is strong in Mary worship, he or she will definitely talk about how they were a virgin forever. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, we've always been a religious country for a while. Not always, I can't say that. So, you know what? That one might work. There's a lot of women that just want a massage. I can tell you that. It's when you're an atheist, it's harder to find it. I mean, I've already told people I'd be tolerant of somebody with religious beliefs, but don't try to proselytize me into it. That's actually fairly common in the U.S. too. It's a dirty little secret. There's a lot of people that go to church on Sunday morning and don't believe a word of it. So I ran into many of them as a pastor. There you go. There's your chastity belt. Uh, Mary was one like in Jesus from Nazareth. There would have been a very yeah. I The thing about the portrayal of the character Mary is I've noticed that it really depends on who is doing the portraying. Like in Jesus of Nazareth, from Nazareth, that movie, a lot of the people in that story are just stupid. Okay. And they make everybody into, there's a lot of Christian movies that displayed Jesus as the only smart guy in the room, kind of thing, you know. So there's that. I don't know what happened to the gifts from the wise men. That's something I brought up when I think when I did that when I did the video on the wise men. It's like they immediately go to Egypt. The gifts are all portable, so they could have taken them with them. So from a story standpoint, is that what they lived off while they were in Egypt? So they sold it and uh, there is Christian D&D. It's called Dragon Raid. If anybody remembers the old Dragon Raid game, when I was in the youth group, they tried to sell that to us as a Christianized version of D&D. You didn't have stats; you had the fruit of the spirit, and it played like D&D, but it didn't fill a lot of the adventure things. So it was constantly an allegory of Christianity, trying to teach you something about Christianity, and that's not very fun for a role playing game. So when you have that ulterior motive, uh, whatever they spent it on, they didn't have it later. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the thing is with Christianity, it always does this shit to mimic the rest of the world because it loses. The one thing Christianity can't have is you paying attention to anything else. Because the moment you start thinking for yourself and paying attention to other things, you can't, then you could get off track. Well, Dragon Raid was this basic game that they created, that this Christian company created to be like Dungeons and Dragons, but with all these Christian messages. Like you memorize scripture, and in the game, it was like your magic spells, stuff like that. And it was like, okay, it's, and as somebody who was an avid D&D player at the time, it just didn't roll with me because it just wasn't as good. And that tends to be a thing with a lot of Christian knockoff stuff. It's just not as good. Now, there's notable exceptions. Like there are some truly talented people that have done art and music and game design and things like that. So there's that. Yes, you're too good at this game. You're too good. Oh, that's cool. I mean, I haven't played a game in a while. I miss Dungeons and Dragons immensely, but it was one of my favorite things to do. Um, Gay and lame, yes, that's what I'm talking about. It was an attempt to create a discipleship tool using the ideas by Dungeons and Dragons, and it was very lame. Okay, it ended up being very lame. Um, because everybody's basically a cleric. Yeah. And so it doesn't really help when everybody's a cleric. Yeah. So and it the cleric role is one I have fun with still to this day because I used to be a pastor, so I can play that shit. But it was everybody was a cleric and everybody had spells if you could quote the right scriptures, and it was just it was lame. It was lame. I had the whole thing, but it was like my parents bought it for me. It was one of the few times they felt like they fed my gaming addiction. So yeah, it doesn't work either. The video gaming industry. Oh my god, um, it's the video gaming industry when Christians try to take games and make them Christianized. Oh my lord. I think they did one. What was it? want to say Moses. Somebody did a game where you could play Moses and follow along in the story. The problem with biblical video games is you're locked into the story. You can't do any alternative stuff. You can't do any alternative history, or Christians will have a fit. So it limits your ability to be imaginative when you use Christianity as a basis for games. But yeah, let's get this out. But yeah, all right. Well, that's the Bible study. I do want to hear in the comments of the stream what you think of this kind of format where I do the biblical studies on Monday, and then on Wednesday we'll talk about it a little bit more detail, bring up the text and kind of look at it. You guys have had some good comments and good questions, and there's always been good discussion, and of course also deviant discussion, which is always entertaining. So yeah, Dante's Inferno though is based on something you can actually really imagine. Like you have Dante's description of the hells BS, but boy, you can play with that. Like you can't, because so many people feel that like the Bible is history. If you mess with the history, like if you let's say you did an alternative history of the Bible, like let's say you find a way to stop Noah's flood from happening by convincing some more people to be righteous, it's like people are going to have a fit with that. They're going to have an absolute fit with that. So, but I would be very, it's like, it's hard to make a religious video game because it's a small demographic that it's going to appeal to. But Dante's Inferno appeals to me because it's like, it's okay. I can see that. I could use that. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think I bounce around from translation to translation because I know too much about translation, Rimmer, to really take it seriously anymore. But yeah, I think this kind of format where I drop a video, you guys can talk about it there, and then we'll have a live discussion. I think it's going to work for me. I'm trying to fill slots, so I did have the goal up today. We've hit 6 super chats this week. I didn't even mention it, forgot to. So there's no ads on the rest of my live streams for the week, but we still need a few more, about 4 more if I'm going to do a Friday video. So, but we have tomorrow's deconversion hangout, so maybe it'll happen then. So thanks everybody. I got to run. I do have to get ready for work and all that stuff, and that involves getting something to eat because I haven't really ate yet. So thanks everybody. Appreciate all of you stopping by. Do the things that you guys do, like share the video, all that stuff. Appreciate it all. And it does my heart if you subscribe and do all the things. So thank you very much. And it's been a good discussion tonight. I think some of the other biblical passages will be even more fascinating. So, but yes, as Earl says, hit the buttons or else, allegedly. So, but thanks everybody. Appreciate all of you. As always, live your best life. You only get go around, and then it's over. So make sure you're taking all your time, money, and energy and placing it into yourself, the people you love and care for, to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. I speak from experience, and don't waste it on trappings of religion, faith. It's a dead end. And as always, folks, thanks for stopping by, and I will catch you all next time.